And welcome to a random bonus episode here. Had not much opportunity to get Pat from USFL News Hub on here to chat, so finally got to make that happen today, and just in time to kind of see the regular season come to a close and hopefully stretch on to the postseason for the Panthers. But we'll see how that goes. Thanks for joining, Pat. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I think the last time I came on the show, I was pretty vocal about Paxton Lynch going to total 15 touchdowns or 20 touchdowns if he started all 10 games. So once upon a time, man. Once upon a time.
Yeah, we've had a few takes that have turned out not exactly the most accurate, but I mean, I've enjoyed the travel, the journey along the way.
Hey, man, Paxton Lynch, I think now has a total of 20 touchdowns between the USFL and the XFL. So he got more touchdowns than me and you combined. So he's doing something right, right? And he's like 6'7".
Yeah, I mean, first round draft pick. Can't say I do any better, like you said. Certainly wouldn't.
And he's got 20 million reasons why he's figured it out more than us. So
Yeah, but like you said, he's the one getting paid, not us. So we just get to sit back and armchair quarterback.
oh, 100%. And I think we're brilliant at it, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, we're batting 1,000.
Yeah, it's all good, man. Appreciate you coming on. I think we kind of jacked this up, man, because some of our phone conversations are probably better than any content we put out. And that's kind of our downfall, is that we're not constantly recording each other, which is I think slightly illegal in some states. But hey, man, I'm all about it.
Yeah. I think technically Michigan is a one-party state. I'm guessing Missouri's probably much the same. So yeah, probably could have done that.
Unless you're doing it to the governor, then it's an issue.
Yeah, they can do it to us though.
Yeah, crazy. They're listening right now, man. They want to know the scoop. They want to know the inside scoop of what's going on and everything. They're like, man, these damn Michigan Panthers, we bring them back to Ford Field, and this is what they do to us.
All right, well, let's give them something to listen into then. So, your thoughts on the year? Obviously, last year we touched base at the beginning of the year, as far as recording goes. Saw how that turned out. So far this year, kind of your thoughts on what we've seen.
I mean, it's an improvement, but do you feel like it's an improvement based off the win-loss total? While we had the Shea Patterson experience last year, who did make the Saskatchewan Roughriders final roster, so he's still employed by a professional football team. We have all this good stuff going on last year, and it's like I felt like the team was more exciting to watch on the offense at times last year. But I think our defense, especially our front seven, last year was really left much to be desired. And we talk about a decent amount is the gentleman like Breland Speaks, who we see this guy and we see his personal accolades, but we see the improvement and the demand he brings, which allows the guys like Ginda and even Noah Dawkins, when he's healthy, to be able to flow a lot freer. And obviously they've shored up the middle a little bit with a guy like Garrett Marino and Jamal Melan's come on. But a guy who's probably getting a real good experience is Mr. Levi Bell, who the muscle hamster right there, who's been doing big things all around as far as his production. And I think being around a guy like Speaks really has improved him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the experience from DC Brown and Coach Nolan, they've really helped turn the defense around. Obviously, like you said, last year's offense was a lot more exciting. Definitely statistically fourth, even worse. One of the worst statistics last year for the offense was fourth in points per game, and that's still top half of the league. So, granted, it was the defense that took the slide. Beginning of this year, it looked like, hey, we might actually have a complete team, and then as soon as we hit that home game stretch, it just all kind of seemed to fall apart, and the offense forgot how to offense.
Yeah, I think the offensive line has been exposed a little bit. Like Brodarius Ham it seems like he's dealing with an injury, but also like I think he was PFF's like highest rated tackle, maybe offensive lineman for like the first 4 weeks, and he's fallen off a little bit. They've moved Josh Dunlap around a decent amount. I've never been high on Keith Williams or Sean Pollard that much. But he does look a lot better playing guard, but last year he was absolutely atrocious at center. So I mean, Shea and Paxton way more mobile than Josh, so they were able to kind of do some things. But Corbin seems to be. I mean, the Reggie Corbin thing, man. I think he follows you on Twitter. I know he doesn't follow me. And my biggest thing was his lack of versatility. I think last year he only had like 6 receptions, and this year I think he's in the low 20s, high teens, which is great. But I don't think we talk about enough Cam's Mr. Do-It-All, Cam Scarlett not being on the team. And maybe the extra fatigue has weighed on Reggie because he's still returning kicks, obviously.
Yeah, there's a few pieces that I would have liked to see return from last year that might have been, able to give us a little bit more of a boost in production this year. I do think the offensive line being a liability and Josh Love not being able to be as mobile also kind of help or hurts the production from our running backs as well. They can just tee off and sit there and not really have to respect the pass game so much. Like Love is very, very capable of dropping some dimes, and we've seen some absolute beautiful throws from him all year, like NFL caliber throws. But then he just stares down his receivers and can't get the ball over the line, which again, in part is due to the O line itself. So that's not lent to our offense being as explosive as I think it could be. It's really kind of let down a lot of our playmakers, and especially Corbin and Scott.
Well, I also think too, it's like I noticed it appeared at certain points last year our tight ends would stay in on these 3 receiver sets and kind of add some extra tips and whatnot. But with Hikatini and Baugh being more involved in the passing game, and shocking football talk right here, them not being so like involved in pass protection or even the chips because they've been, those guys have been attacking the seams left and right. I think the tight end position has like 8 total touchdowns combined, maybe plus or minus, obviously. But regardless, like they've been major players this year. You're not having the same amount of protection to where even if the offensive line is slightly better, um, Josh is under more pressure, and we're kind of seeing the results of that right now.
Yeah, that's fair. Our tight ends do account for a little over half of Love's touchdowns, so 7 of his 13 this year. So yeah.
And then you're putting the stress on Corbin to do the pass blocking, and that's not his MO, which is something I've talked about time and time again. As like, I don't want to say it's slight on the guy, but like, I mean, you want to be an NFL running back, you have to pass block because he's not coming in to be RB1. He's coming in to be RB3. And I don't think enough people, you know, realize that some of these players, like, that's not their MO, like they're not. Josh Love isn't competing to be a starting quarterback. He's going to be a QB3 type thing. So I mean, it's not. And the thing is, I'm not trying to throw shade at Reggie. Like I think he's great for what he's doing, but like when you get to those 53-man rosters, everybody needs to do something. So
Yeah, I mean, but he's been fairly effective in the kick returns, and so I like seeing him use. He was I think he's probably put a little too much on him though as well this year to be effective, and unfortunately, I think part of that also the O line is ultimately what led to him being injured and unfortunately being out last week. Though with as dominant as the Maulers defense is, I don't know if his presence, missed. I don't know if it would have made a gigantic impact.
yeah, I mean, maybe on the checkdowns and whatnot, get them in some space and whatnot. Take a 3-yard pass, turn it into a 7-yard pass instead of first and or second and 10. You're looking at second and 3. Maybe situations like that. But I mean, and you got to account for him on the field. I mean, I didn't. AJ Richardson is cool. Like I think he's really cool, but I mean he's not a true running back, and like he had 99 yards receiving, which is awesome, but like it's not. I'm not freaking out that AJ Richardson's like out there. You know what I mean? Like if it's a jet sweep or something like that, yeah, we'll see something. But that's my take on it for this rushing attack. I think they're kind of hoping that Toa, the kid out of Nevada, can be a little bit more in that Cam Scarlett role. He played a lot of special teams this weekend, but I mean, we'll see what's up. We got one more game to figure it out.
Yeah, and don't know Reggie's status for this week yet. Not a whole lot ever gets, really out until a couple days before, so we won't find out unfortunately until Friday. But with him just being questionable last week, or at least doubtful. I'm optimistic that we do hopefully at least get to see him this week. It's kind of one of those. It's a do or die game. So obviously, it's football, and his health is probably more important than the football game. But at the same time, it is for the team and a team sport. Like I can see him getting himself out there. And if he's able to, if he is healthy enough to do that, then I think his presence this weekend will certainly be needed. He's
Well,
been
we
able
really
to kill stars, in all the 3 times that he's played them so far.
Yeah, and we really don't need him to play much on special teams. And
Mm.
I'm maybe talking out both sides of my mouth, but like Caden Davis has done a decent job in that capacity. And I mean, while special teams is obviously always important, I would rather see him get 15 carries and 2 receptions out touch the ball almost 20 times than him have one big kickoff return and then that's the end of the game, because he got hit at the end and hurt his shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't really seem to change much the starting position, regardless of who's catching the ball on these returns. For whatever reason, our special teams has not been. I guess I shouldn't say for no reason or for whatever reason, because Fisher obviously that was one of his big focus points last year, and I think that showed in the efficacy of our special teams. But this year, definitely has taken a step back, and obviously the blocked punt from this last weekend is just that perfect example of that. But overall, our special teams has not been the greatest, hasn't set us up with some of the better field positions as we've seen some other teams do. So whether it's Reggie or Walker or Davis back there, returning the kicks, it doesn't make so much of an impact. So yeah, I kind of agree with you there, especially for this week. If Reggie's healthy enough, don't risk him in special teams.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. I mean, that's what I would do. Like you said, there's Caden and Joe. They can return, some kicks. AJ Richardson, I kind of like to see in space a little bit more. There are options there. So, I mean, Murphy's been pretty good this year. The punting game, as when it's not getting, kind of jerked around, that mishap they had there, that miscommunication more than anything, which I think I saw Marcus Sims as the up back, so that could have been on him. I don't know how much I've seen of him being the up back. That could have been on him not understanding the scheme. Which when you have these small rosters for both this league or the XFL, you got to make you kind of got it gets real wacky. And something I talked to Coach Beck about was when they start getting injuries, I was like, so how do you prepare for that on special teams? He's like, we get real simple on everything. We can't do our fakes. We can't do this. We can't do that. So it's, no matter how big the rosters are, what league you're invested in, it's definitely a wild ride. Being a special teams coordinator in one of these leagues for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, defense, we talked mostly about offense because that is the biggest area of concern. Defense is doing fantastic. Love the fact that we have arguably the 2 top candidates for defensive player of the year through these 9 weeks in Breland Speaks and, of course, Frank Ginda. So, like, that there doesn't seem to be much of a weakness in our defense, except for maybe sometimes scheme, obviously, a lot of zone at times, leaving us to get gashed. And ultimately, I think our defense has done a pretty good job at halting teams from scoring, but with our way that our offense has been not performing, I'd like to see us be able to get the defense off the field a little quicker. But as far as the weaknesses go, what do you think is our biggest weakness?
Um, Saba's been okay. Some days I'm like, man, this guy's got all the tools. Other days I'm like, no. Um, I mean, Josh Butler, I just feel like gets a lot of work, and just by attrition, he is going to be having some issues. If that makes sense. You have, Corian Ballard. Is that his name? I'm sorry, number 7. I always forget
Yep.
his name.
Yep.
Corian
Ballard.
Ballard. He's kind of someone that I'm not really too keen on. Uh, you know, once again, kind of getting exposed because Taylor's done a really good job. We haven't really seen Kai Nakua get too much in the passing game exposure, other than like he'll be in zone and then quarterback throw the ball and kind of split the zone a little bit. So I mean, there's some negative on that. But that front seven's been real good, and I think it all starts with Speaks being able to free everyone up. Deshaun White is someone I need to do a bigger deep dive on, because obviously the big thing for me about Deshaun White is, one, he was signed in favor of Central Latham, who was their 3rd-round pick. White was a 5th-round pick, but I don't really get caught up in the rounds for any of these rights drafts, because are you drafting the best player, or are you drafting the most available player? So that's something to keep count on. But also, are we, what's the word I'm looking for? Are we looking at, also Terry Myrick was replaced in that. So I mean, is he really up to speed? He had a pretty decent career at Oklahoma, because I think they really thought Patty Fisher was going to be a lot more involved than he has been, which he's been kind of regulated to a special teams guy.
Yeah, I was definitely expecting to see his name called a bit more. I was super excited to see Fisher be one of our free agent signings during the offseason, but like you said, he has not been a fixture on our defense, certainly not first team defense. So a little disappointing, a little surprising to me. But speaking of that, there's been a lot of surprising personnel decisions by this coaching staff this year that lot of it has been unexpected, like the cutting of Central Latham. He was activated one week, saw playing time, and then was immediately released that following week. Obviously, we had Ish Hyman getting released. We had Eric Berry getting released, and probably one of, if not the biggest offseason signings for the entire league in Robert Kamdichi. He got cut in the final round of roster cuts before the season started. So a lot of things that may have made me go, some things definitely I've disliked and have been actually quite vocal about. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Bob was released because he's got a pretty dynamic personality, and it was a mesh thing. I'm not sure who he wasn't meshing with, but it wasn't his skill set. And he just signed with the IFL's Vegas Nighthawks, I believe. So I'm very
Yep.
curious to see what happens with him. The IFL to XFL partnership is still active, and Bob trains with a lot of XFL guys. So I kind of foresee that him getting another opportunity with that league,
Yeah.
and this isn't XFL fanboying here. It's just, connections are everything, right? Like Jaime Elizondo was trying to get Case Cookus there, and Case didn't really want to go. He didn't want to go to San Antonio, but the only reason why, and Case is a good quarterback, and we'll talk about him more. But the only reason Case was getting that call over someone else was because Jaime knew him. You know what I mean? And relationships matter. What happened? Him and Bart are really really tight. I know that for a fact. So he, was tighter with Bart and Jaime. So stayed there with the Stars. And, obviously there's wanting to go to the championship and a lot of that stuff as well. So these connections matter. The cut of Latham, it might have been a personnel thing. I'm not really sure. It seemed like it was a issue with the team because I think we saw some players like writing tweets about it themselves. I think Barrier was more of an opportunity thing. Like I felt like we were gonna ride or die with Josh Love, and I mean Josh, for 2 games played really well. Had a good game against the Breakers and a good game against I believe against the Generals, and then he couldn't put it together for this week, and it just kind of all kind of fell apart.
Yeah. I mean, anybody listening to the last few weeks of the podcast know that my grief, or one of my griefs, with the Barrier situation with him being released, is the fact that we did it with 3 weeks of the regular season to go, while still very much in playoff contention. It's not like we've just tripped and fell into being in position to be able to make the playoffs this year. So doing that and leaving the only a quarterback with any experience on the offense on the team was there for 1 week with Lewerke, and then he was all of a sudden now QB2, and that just kind of baffles me on why we took that. Like, I get getting Perry because he was available, and I think he's going to be a great quarterback for the future if he doesn't get picked up by the NFL in the offseason. But again, when you're in playoff contention, and the fact that you could also roster more than 3 quarterbacks, because we saw the Generals have 4 quarterbacks because 2 were on the inactive list just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it seemed like that.
You could have kept Barrier, signed Perry, and just released someone that hasn't seen any playing time.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're biased about Lewerke, and I to an extent maybe I am as well, but I think my take on Lewerke is Steven Montez was still on the Lions, I believe, when the XFL broke camp. So Brian Lewerke went into that training camp as the true QB2. So he got QB2 reps, which are a decent amount of reps, and this guy couldn't get it done. You know what I mean? Like, he could not get it done. He had the opportunity, and he was released in favor of Harrison Frost. That tells me a lot about how Brian Lewerke was doing. Is that they went with a true 2023 rookie over Lewerke, who has been in the Patriots organization. He's been with the Giants. He played with the Spring League, like actually played in the Spring League. And they decided that Lewerke was the better, or excuse me, Harrison Frost was the better option. That tells me a lot right there.
Yeah, and I think that just kind of plays into my concerns with some of the personnel decisions. And it does seem like this year there's been more of an emphasis on team chemistry, or at least with, being able to get along with the coaching staff, kind of like you said with Latham, kind of what it seemed to be with Hyman as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that bodes well because I think maybe they're getting these directions from the league, which means, the league's committed to a long-term build, In my opinion, that could be a segue into it. I don't know if I'm right at all, but I mean, with spring football, every game you're holding your breath that, that you're not going to have an AAF situation, or, even I get 2020 XFL was its own beast kind of, but I mean, every week, I'm holding my breath for both these leagues, and I think there's been enough mishaps with other leagues that these guys kind of know what our acceptable losses are now and whatnot. But at the same time, it's still like, to me, that's a good sign that they're actually caring about the team chemistry, and they're kind of building pieces for a more long-term play, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just wish they weren't important pieces that they were letting go of. Like I would get again, understand it more so at the end of the season, in the off season, go ahead and let some players go. Like unless they're an absolute team cancer and they're going to drag down the team and just make it unbearable for the rest of the season. But honestly, I don't know if that is the case or if hopefully that's the case. Not for the players' sake, but for my sanity's sake and my faith in the coaching staff.
Well, I mean,
But
players, it gets weird because your talent pool shrinks for both these leagues in week 8 and on, right? Like, do you think EJ Perry's phone didn't ring when, well, EJ Perry was on the Texans at the time, but a guy like EJ Perry's phone didn't ring when Eric Dungy was released for the DC Defenders? Like, do you think Jeremy Hickbottom was their first choice, or is he like, you know what, I can go to the US? Another guy's like, I can go to the USFL, make more money, whether I'm on the active or inactive list, and still like, maybe have an opportunity to get activated and play and whatnot. And so it becomes very hard at this stage of the game to sign. I don't want to use the word top tier talent, but for an XFL team that's looking for the fill in the back spot, why if the XFL is calling me, the USFL is calling me, and vice versa with like a USFL team, it's like I'm only going to make if I'm inactive $4,500. I rather work a air quote regular job, go to an XFL showcase, and then have an opportunity to make almost 70 grand with an XFL team. So I think the talent pool gets weird, in my opinion, at the back end of both these leagues, if that makes sense.
yeah, I get that. And then you kind of have to think for the next year and realistically of who you're going to lose in the offseason. So I to a large extent, I guess I get that. It's still just especially when you actually like some of the players and you like that the production that they've been able to have, or at least even with Barrier's case, the potential that he had, because obviously the Generals took zero time in swooping him up, and love from what I've heard, they absolutely love the fact that they were able to get him. So wish him well. But kind of makes me
Yeah, I mean,
it kind of
I
makes me
think I think the Generals picking up Barrier is definitely a 2024 move. Um,
absolutely.
and they did a good job releasing Lauletta, and I could see Lauletta getting picked up, um, by an XFL team, by a USFL team, maybe even like an NFL team that he's familiar with, like for the last 2 weeks of the season type thing, just because they're like, I know this guy, and you see guys like that get signed every once in a while, out of nowhere type thing. So, it wouldn't be the most outlandish possibility in my opinion, even though I don't agree with it.
Right.
But I mean, like I think Barrier, because DeAndre's had two bouts of injuries this year. He's improved as a passer this year tremendously. However, you know, he definitely is a better thrower of the football than Eric is definitely a better thrower of the football than DeAndre. So why not go for it? I'm curious to see what happens with Prue Cup. Um, he's kind of mid to me, just a mid tier guy. Nothing too sexy or anything like that. So we'll see what happens with him as far as what his future is.
Yeah, and I think that we have this kind of the same similar situation with the three quarterbacks on the Panthers. See what we do with those three if Love is still the guy that we carry on into next season, or if he is kind of one of those expendable pieces, and then we kind of build off of Lewerke and Perry, since clearly we wanted them if we brought them in and sign them when we didn't necessarily have to, though kind of did with Lewerke with Strong going down, but certainly didn't have to with Perry. So that'll be an interesting development. But before we get to our off season, we do have one more game at the very least this coming up this weekend that hopefully leads into at least one other game, ideally two more games. Uh, two games that we win. So hopefully we can knock out three in a row. We haven't done that yet this week, but still a chance, and that starts with this weekend's game. What are your thoughts about the Panthers coming home, seeking their first home win of the year in front of the hometown crowd at Ford Field to lock in their berth into the playoffs as the number 2 seed for the North?
I think it all comes down to this young man named Drew Himmelman and the left tackle the of the Philadelphia Stars. He started 3 games, 4 games for them. You saw some much improved. That's kind of when Cookus began to cook. Much improved offensive line play from him. After that, he's the left tackle, so he'll be going up against Breland Speaks a lot. Ted Cottrell made a freaking all-star move by taking Hercules Matafafa and putting him on the left side. I thought that was a great move to go up against Aaron Cervais, who's a left tackle that they've had a lot of issues with. And he's been playing left tackle, he's been playing guard. They've done all that. And, if Cervais is their starting left tackle, Speaks is going to have a lot of havoc. And, we'll see Cookus move to his right a lot. He's very comfortable doing that. And probably into the arms of Levi Bell.
One can only. So do you think pretty good outlook for the Panthers? Do you think we like our chances? Or I know you said what it's all coming down to, but when the dice are rolled, when the game is played, who do you think actually comes out on top?
And I don't know, and I think this whole game goes on Case, man. I really I think Love, I think Love's going to play okay. Maybe a 1-1 or 2-1 or 1-2 touchdown to interception ratio type thing. But I think he is going to Case Cookus, that is really going to be the defining factor of this, because I think as far as our offensive line is slightly better, just because the Stars are the Stars. I think our defense is better. I do like, obviously, Adam Rodriguez, and they got Carson Taylor and Nasir Player on the defensive line. These guys are all extremely talented defensive linemen. I think our linebackers match up better than them. Amani Dennis, I don't want to use the word exposed, but I definitely think he's benefited from Stribling being there, and Stribling's not there anymore. So that, now you're getting down to your cornerback 3 and 4 against our receiving core. Flip a coin, who's got a better receiving core, in my opinion. Obviously Corey Coleman doing big things on his side, but regardless, maybe Coleman is better than any of our receivers, but maybe our receiving group is more well-rounded. I think we edge out on tight ends, but we do have that hole on our kind of left side of the secondary with Josh Butler getting a lot of work, and is Warren Saba or Corian Ballard going to be able to? If those two guys make a play, I think it'll be a lot better for us. But I think this game comes up to up front, and it's going to be our defensive line just putting as much pressure on Case as they can.
Yeah, like how the Maulers are an absolute matchup nightmare for the Panthers, as we've seen both games this year. Not a whole lot of different, kind of same story both times that we played them. But like that, I think we match up really well against the Stars. Obviously, their O-line, like I said, is suspect. Our front 7 is one of the best in the league, certainly top 3, right up there with the Maulers. And then our secondary, if not really good, at the very least serviceable. Taylor obviously has not given up a single touchdown. You have Butler, has made some really good plays. It has also been a liability at sometimes, but like you said earlier, could just be the sheer fact that he's dealing with a much higher volume number of throws coming his ways. And at some point, you're not going to be able to get all of them, and you're going to give up some plays. And then Nakua, and then of course our safeties. So I like that. I like the fact that the Stars' run defense is still not stout. You get Robinson or Richardson and Scott going. I think they can certainly run strong. Scott is not exactly a bowling ball. He's not Vito, but he's definitely a strong runner. As you saw some of the runs that he had against the Stars earlier in the year, in week 2, he is very capable of breaking some plays off. I think Richardson is a capable runner. If not, as we saw last week, he is very capable pass catcher, as he is, a wide receiver by trade. So I like the matchup that we have with the Stars. But yeah, it's going to be if we are able to knock Cookus out of the game, that would certainly help our chances, though not that I want to see anybody get hurt. Certainly not a marquee player for the league like Cookus, but anything we can do to rattle him, keep him, not 100% is certainly going to help us. And then, yeah, I think ultimately it might just come down again to how serviceable of a QB Love is. Is he having a game like he did against the Gamblers and even a game against the Stars? Because I think a lot of his problems that game were the drops and just the weather was nasty. But obviously, we're not going to have a weather issue being in the dome. So if he could play similarly like he did in week 2, I really, really do like the Panthers' chances against the Stars to, get their first win at home and, notch a win and get into the playoffs.
Yeah, Josh and Case both in that second game. Timing was off a decent amount because of the weather. They were double clutching the football. It looked like re-gripping a lot. So I definitely don't lose my mind too much about their performance in week 2 and that nasty spell. But in the end, I think you hit the nail on the head. Stevie Scott's going to be a big component of this game, but I'm staying pretty stout on my mentality of this defensive line is going to have to be the one that wins this game.
Yep, they did in week 2. I certainly see no reason why they can't again. Whether they do or not, you would think that Andrus would certainly scheme to keep, Cookus away from Speaks and hopefully, and expect that the true rookie in Bell isn't going to be able to get to Cookus. That's probably going to have to be more of their game plan. Whether they're successful in that, I think is definitely going to play heavily into the outcome of the game. But yeah, I agree. I think our front seven is going to have to still keep their dominance for at least one more game in order to make sure that we play at least one other game.
Yeah, it's it's a pretty simple formula with them. Win in the trenches and then take care of business and go on. Not to sound so simplify it. It's to the point of it's what is it like? If you score more points than the other team, you're probably going to win. Well, if you control the trenches, you're probably going to win. So take that
Yeah.
for what you know.
Yeah, and my issue has been through the year too is that we've won several games as far as time of possession battle. We've won in multiple games, but obviously we've only managed to win 3 games. So holding the ball does not seem to be a huge component of our success this year. But I do think field position is probably also going to play a part. I think our special teams is going to need to be a little more competent to give us that extra boost this week.
Yeah, we talked about the pump block. Obviously we saw what Mangold did last week and what Brock Miller's done throughout the year. Really, really putting the team on their back, so to speak. And you know, even if you have a bad third and long situation, or get the ball, it's fourth down. The ability to obviously flip the field and get the opponent within inside the 20 is obviously something that you know what these specialists want to do and showcase. And I mean, Mangel's done a great job. Kramer's done okay. I think he's been nominated for a playoff, or a Player of the Week award. So while it's not as sexy as it was last year, outside of a few hiccups, it hasn't been the most daunting thing I've ever seen.
No, our kicking and punting have actually been fairly solid. It's been a lot of the like actually tackling and getting some blocks for our returns that have been my biggest issue. Also, punt block or punt protection in week 1 was still suspect. So it's been
Yeah.
That's been the roughest part of special teams for me. Not so much Kramer and Murphy, though. Murphy definitely hasn't looked exactly like he was last year, but still, I think as we mentioned, any other year his kicking percentage would certainly be tops or near the top in spring football. But the USFL has been fantastic this year in that.
Yeah,
But
the league has done an amazing job. Like with all like last year, the kicking was absolutely atrocious, and I mean this year, man, if you don't think the USFL kicking is better, like, and maybe you can play devil's advocate with the chips in the ball last year, but I mean it's been pretty good kicking in my opinion. Like
yeah,
it,
they removed the chips in the ball after like week 1 or 2 last year. So the
yeah,
bulk of the season was, with the kicker balls with no chips in it. So there was that argument to be made at the beginning of the year, but after the first couple of weeks, it certainly, didn't hold up.
yeah. No, I mean it's 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 uh it's it's been something, So I don't know. Overall, uh I don't know. You what you call I mean, I've talked about this on a couple show, and it's been a I don't know. I'm a fan of it. Like the kicking, obviously Aguilar. Like we can. I don't really want to talk about kickers for 5 hours, but Blewett's been. He's an NFL fringe guy. Luis has been pretty good. Skiba is not bad either. Murphy's pretty good. Coughlin's had some uh, like stints where he was, the guy, and then Alex Kessman. I think I saw a tweet today. Uh, is what you call it? Alex Kessman, I think, has made like 19 years in a row, or 19 years, 19,
Field goals.
19, yeah, 19 field goals in a row. So I mean, like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
Like,
then Aubrey's has been solid too. Like he kind of seems to be the forgotten one, but he's been solid for the last 2 straight years, just doing his thing. He hasn't been, hasn't had the opportunities to be, a Coughlin or an Aguiar and having to kick 5, 8 field goals in a game in order to, to get the victory. So he's kind of flown under the radar. But last I checked, and it was a couple weeks ago, but I believe he was 100% on field goals. So yeah, it's been a really impressive showing for special teams this year. And even if Aguiar has to get a few field goals this week, I think that we can handle that.
yeah, and I mean, Brandon's been awesome this year. I just pulled up his stats. He's 12 of 13. Obviously, opportunities are a big thing. His only miss is from 50 out. And 22, he's 18 of 22. He's 100% on 32 extra points, which are obviously from the 33 or their 33-yard attempts. And with this Stallions offense, how much they score, it's even more impressive because his volume is obviously pretty increased as well. So I mean, like I said, well, I don't know how much people want to hear us talk kicking and all that stuff, but it's definitely a crucial part of the game that if either A, the casual fan saw it was inadequate, they'd be all over it, and B, if you're a hater of the league, you know, if it wasn't to par, everyone would be freaking out about it as well. So, I mean, it's impressive, regardless. So, I mean, Kessman making 19 field goals straight, it's pretty awesome. It doesn't get much better than that.
No, it doesn't. And yeah, like it's kind of one of those kind of like offensive line play too. You don't really think too much on it when it goes well, but when you notice a gigantic lack in that, when the O line's play is not what you expect it to be, or yeah, you're missing PATs and field goals left and right, then you start noticing it. But yeah, unfortunately, like you said, it's not the sexiest part of football, but it's certainly important. And
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
glad that the league has actually gotten it right this year.
yeah, I mean, 7 out of 8 of these guys are doing pretty well. Vogel's the worst one, so curious to see what they got going with him, which is a shame because, Tyler Ralsha wasn't too bad last year either. And he's obviously not he doesn't have a job with either one of these leagues. So it's a personal shame in my opinion, but it is what it is. So, but yeah, I mean, more field there's only the max for field goal kickers in the XFL was only 19, by Parker Romo and Taylor Russolino. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth,
So obviously we talked about Panthers, and that's obviously primarily what the podcast is. But league as a whole, I've kind of had some conversations about just how this league has compared to itself last year, and even to the XFL level of play this year. And from my perspective, I've actually quite liked what we've seen. I think we've definitely seen a lot better play overall this year in the USFL than last year, for certainly. Um, Even with some of our marquee quarterbacks not actually being a part of this year. Obviously, J.M.R. Smith in Birmingham being injured and out for the year. So we had Magoo and him really showing up. Then we had obviously Sloter, who went to the XFL, came back, hasn't been able to play because he's on the roster with the Stallions and obviously behind Magoo, who's not going to give him any playing time. We don't have Brian Scott again, who was lighting up the league last year at the beginning of the year. We didn't have Perez. So seeing like some of those guys that either went to the league or went to the XFL, we've picked up where we left off and have been even better, which personally I expected, but still, I love seeing it. But from my perspective, do you see the same thing, or if not, what's different? What do you say?
So my personal opinion, I think it got off to a hot start, cooled off in those 3 weeks, 3 to 5, 3 to 6, and then we started to see kind of these guys come back into their own, which in my opinion, offense might be better. Defense catches up because they're playing more complex schemes. Offense takes a minute to adjust, and then the defense kind of goes. I do my weekly quarterback rankings, and at one point I had Bahar as like number 2 or number 3 because the quarterbacks just weren't really doing anything. McLeod, at first he was my top guy for a couple weeks. Magoo was doing good stuff, but McLeod had some big games up front. A couple big rushing attempts as well that made waves over social media. We saw a lot of that good stuff, and then from there, I think everyone kind of came into their own, in my opinion, and has really kind of taken it by storm. Love had some good games. MBT's kind of been uber consistent since his big outings. I mean, what can you say about Alex Magoo? The guy's definitely not a slouch. He's definitely kind of perfect for alt league football, and possibly is doing enough to garner himself an opportunity in the NFL. Been uber high on him. I had him as a number 6 quarterback coming in, and he's obviously matured into the number 1 spot, no problem. Case has been dealing with lots of injury and offensive line issues and whatnot. So, but I also think there was a lot of good acquisitions by the league as well that kind of raised that play. And they lost 70 guys to the to the XFL, and great job by the scouting department because they're in a good position to pick up a lot of fringe NFL guys, in my opinion, because of the XFL rosters are kind of set when the futures contracts come out, and when the futures contracts come out, a lot of these guys who are on the team for 30 something weeks, 20 something weeks, they're not offered and they want to play football. Well, the XFL is already gone, so you're able to pick up a lot of good NFL guys that just got released and are ready to play football. So I think
Yep.
they did a good job. Obviously he didn't make the team, but Bob Nimdici was a great pickup, and we talked about him a little bit. But Speaks, Trey Quinn, Corey Coleman, Wes Hills coming from Canada. They were able to poach a couple Canadian players. I talked about him too, Drew Himmelman. Getting cut by the Commanders in May. There's another kid, Joe DeBlanco. He was a captain for the Brahmas. He's obviously a good player. And then Ryan Greenhagen's another guy. Then they did a decent job keeping some of their key pieces, like Channing Stribling came back. So you had the Toby Johnson, Boogie Roberts, Ginda, and
Corbin.
you said what? Corbin. Yeah, Corbin
Corbin.
was a big one, obviously. So I mean, when you have that good core, and you can call me biased here on this accord, but it does make a lot more sense to play for your body February to April. But when you have a good core and you have the track records of guys playing in the NFL, it's going to make in the league an attractive place for NFL caliber talent. No issue, no qualms about that.
Yeah, I'll go on the record and say I think both have their perks. If anybody knows me, they've heard me say that I agree. The same thing. I think February to May is probably the better for the players overall as far as being able to be ready for NFL camps. But the simple fact that we put over a dozen, the USFL put over a dozen players into the league on rosters this past season is also evidence of the fact that while you can make the argument that the XFL season timing is better, it's still very effective with the USFLs, and obviously you can get guys into camps. We had around 60 signed last year, over 200 workouts. So I think either schedule is very very efficient very effective for all the players. So I'm not super worried about that. I don't think that obviously is not going to sink the USFL in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, it is what it is. But like I said, it hasn't hampered players from being able to get into the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely not. And not to sound tacky here, but if you're good at football and you have good fundamentals, you see this a lot on highlight tapes, is where a quarterback will throw a pass, and I'll give an example. DeAndre Johnson, right? Some of these guys don't know how to make their highlight tapes. So, and I'm not saying DeAndre, I'm just using, he threw a short ball to Daryl Stewart, who made a great grab, and he whatchamacallit, he Daryl Stewart made a great grab. And that, like, you're gonna see an 80-yard play or 50-yard play or whatnot. Like, some of these guys, they'll put this on their highlight, and like sometimes for these quarterbacks, the incompletions are more important to your highlight film than your actual film and whatnot. So, or excuse me, than your actual stat line. So we'll see what happens with that. I mean, it's it's a lot of good agents, all that goofy stuff and whatnot. But in the end, like, I mean, there's plenty of guys out here that there's plenty of guys out here that are doing an awesome job and whatnot, and the talent evaluators are gonna find the guys who can play.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been thinking about how I am going to place my individual honors for after Sunday. I'm gonna do the team individual honors for MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year. Before I do that, what are yours?
As far as like for the league or our team?
Just for the Panthers, and
Uh,
then if you want to give the league after that, yeah.
so I think, man, I'm gonna have to flip a coin between Joe Walker and Trey Quinn on the offense. And nothing against Reggie, but nothing against Reggie, but he is, he's just hurt. You know what I mean? And he hasn't, and I mean, you can make a case for Reggie, but he's also my big thing is he's been hurt, and I think Joe has been more consistent than him overall. Um, with the defense, I mean, statistically, you want to give the Ginda, but I've been very vocal about how awesome, uh, how awesome,
Well, Speaks has
he
been
has
with
forever. So, and then I
and
get pardon.
so and I was gonna just say, like, I don't think we've touched on it, but we've touched on it before, with how Speaks has opened up Bell to be able to really come into his own, kind of taking up that defense, and has allowed him to shine in the fact that Bell has been able to make such an impact as a rookie so quickly. I think speaks obviously a lot and mostly to him, but also to Breland's impact.
Yeah, 100%. So maybe he could be more of an MVP and give Frank the defensive player of the year for the team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you and I are on the same wavelength here. Uh, Pretty much for all three. With the offense is for me in between Walker and Quinn for sure. Reggie is still, even with missing last week, he is number two in all-purpose yards between his receiving, his rushing, and of course his returns on special teams. He's been effective, but certainly has disappeared in some games, and I think we can also partly blame the passing game and the blocking up front, but still, Quinn and Walker have been kind of more of the two impactful guys that at least really have stood out. And then, of course, kind of have to debate between who gets the defensive player of the year and who gets the MVP between Ginda and Speaks. They've both been phenomenal. Obviously, with the league as a whole, neither of them are going to get MVP, but both are right there for Defensive Player of the Year, and rightfully so. And for me, for the team accolades, yeah, I'm stuck. So I'm definitely going to let this week play out and kind of have to leave that hard decision to my next week's self.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see what the league does with the defensive player of the year. I mean, part of me thinks it's they're gonna go with um Tavino because of recency bias, but at this point, like at this point, who knows? Like I can't. I mean, I can't speak on that. I'm not 100% sure, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be toss up. Gendez retook the lead or had took the lead for total tackles. He's tied for first in interceptions. So he's right there with Tizino. Like I said, I do agree with recency bias. It might help Tizino's case a little bit, but at the same time, between the two of them, Ginda's the one who won the most recent defensive player of the week for week 8, and Tizino placed second behind Poling. So
Yeah, and it's
we'll
also
see how that works.
yeah, and Savino's got those 2 touchdowns. He's got like 2 fumble recoveries for a touchdown, so that
Yeah,
could
those 3 players. Yeah,
yeah.
between those 3 players, I think you can make a good, solid argument for all 3 of them. So I know that I'm really rooting, and I expect it to be one of the 2 Panthers, but honestly, all 3 are deserving.
Yeah, and someone that could make a like Speaks if he goes off this if Speaks gets over 3 sacks this week, I think or it would be 4 or whatever. If he has another 3 or 4 sack game, wins defensive player of the week, then I see it being Speaks jumping Ginda. Especially if he
Yeah,
got like a
yeah,
forced fumble. If he goes like 8 tackles, 3 sacks, 4 sacks, and a forced fumble, I think you give it to Speaks because that means they're going to win the game, and most likely that they're going to win the game. And I mean, while I don't want to throw shade here, while Tavino had a great game last week, they didn't win the game because of him.
no, certainly not. And yeah,
Yeah.
it would be great too because it would be a bookend for Speaks to begin for week 1 and to week 10 defensive player of the week. Yeah, I think that would say a lot. And then he would, of course, tie Ginda for 3 apiece. And uh, yeah, I think it'd still be a really hard decision to make for the league. But I think at that point, like you said, and including the recency bias, Speaks would probably win at that point.
Yeah. I mean, it depends too. You want to get real wacky. If Quinn Poling has a good game, maybe that's a recency bias, Who was very critical of for not finishing a lot, but we'll see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly. So for the league as a whole, then, what's your take?
MVP Magoo.
Yeah, I think that's an obvious one.
Yeah, offensive player of the year. I do think Coleman should catch him. If Coleman has a big game, believe it or not, if Coleman gets 2 touchdowns or a touchdown, um, and he's able to get to like a set, put 100-yard game, maybe Coleman, especially, and the Stars make the playoffs. I could see Coleman getting offensive player of the year because Thompson, hasn't had, he's had a good year, obviously, but the last week, if he goes back to back bad weeks, we'll go into our recency bias. I think Wes Hills is still a underdog in this, because I think he does have the potential to break 1K for all-purpose yards, which is impressive because he does not return kicks. So Hills has a decent game. I think he'll be able to, kind of go over that number, and maybe beat that. But for my offensive player of the year, as of today and going into week 10, it'd be Mark Thompson. Defensive player of the year. I mean, we touched all of it. Flip a coin, depending on who you want.
Yep. I'm right there
Yeah.
with you, though. I think with me for offensive player of the year, uh, Coleman and Hills are definitely right there. Hills obviously has kind of disappeared in the last couple of weeks, starting with us holding him to what I believe 36 yards on 23 carries. So he certainly did not have that much better of an outing last week either. So, but those last 2 weeks, especially if he can come in and cement them, secure them a playoff spot this weekend, I think that he can certainly be right back in the thick of things, especially since they'll be playing Thompson and the Gamblers. So I think between those two, might end up being between those two. Obviously, Coleman, he's going to have to show up against our secondary for him to get that. But I
Do,
I
do
still
they? Do,
think I'm going to maybe go with Coleman.
yeah, I mean, it all comes down what he does this week. Do they do a special teams player of the year of the year?
I don't remember if they did that. I think maybe they did, and it was at Aubrey last year. I know he was the all USFL kicker.
Yeah, I mean, if they do that, I think it becomes depending on what Aguilar does. Um, it's going to come down to Aguilar, Kessman, or Derek Dillon.
Yep, I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it. Trying to find it. No, they didn't do it. They did a Sportsman of the Year, which is probably someone that the team votes on, and then Coach of the Year. Who do you give Coach of the Year to, man?
They gave it to Riley.
No, I'm talking about
Oh, this year, yeah. Good question. At the beginning of the year, you would think that it would have been Flip. Then Haley came on strong, but I know the Stallions won last year. Won the championship last year, and so they, of course, were going to be, one of the favorites to come in and win this year. But the way that they've done it, the way that they've dominated and have been able to just keep winning and rebound even after those couple, 2 games that they had lost.
a lot of
You know,
injuries.
yeah, I think you might just have to give it a skip. As much as I am not a fan of the Stallions, I have no love for them. but I think the combination of Magoo and Holtz, I think that's been a dangerous combo. And you know, as much as Magoo's been obviously fantastic, you know, Skip has been very much a part of that. And maybe to echo last year, how the MVP was Cavante Turpin, and then his coach and Mike Riley won the award for Coach of the Year. Maybe we see that happen again this year.
Yeah, I mean, not an outlandish take, man, but as you can hear, I got to get ready to go. But man, I appreciate you having me on, dude.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for joining. And if you want to let everybody know where they can find you real quick, because like you were alerted to, you do have your QB ranking show. You do tons of different interviews and all that. So let people know where they can get your content.
Yeah, man, find me on YouTube at Analyze and Educate. We're growing a decent amount there, and then on Twitter, I'm pretty active by Pat Rifino. So if you find me on those two things, I'm sure Jake will put them in the description. And appreciate all the love and support. I got some more interviews coming up in the off season. From USFL, XFL, and then some college coaches as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll be paying attention to that. Everybody else should as well. Again, thanks for joining. We'll see how week and hopefully the next few weeks go.
All right, man. Thanks, dude.
Yeah, thanks.